So, ladies and gentlemen, I have three friends that have traveled with me here from New York City Fire Department, who, again, like the police department and like the civilian lost a lot of brave firemen. In the last couple of years, something that would be unheard of 10 or 15 years ago, New York City Fire Department now has a counter-terrorism task force within the fire department. So I'm going to call on one at a time. If you can just make your way up behind Shikey and use that mic, Chief. Deputy Chief Mike Sheen.
How you doing, folks? Thanks very much for having us, Dennis. So something unique to New York City. The FDNY, the Fire Department of the City of New York, and the NYPD have entered into a partnership to respond to active shooters or other hostile events around the city. Essentially, the way it works is the NYPD will go and push that fight immediately, and instead of waiting for the police to clear the entire building, we're brought in under force protection of the NYPD with long guns, and we go to work right away on the victims. The shooter doesn't have to be down or neutralized to create a warm zone for us. They'll push that shooter or a hostile actor, and we'll come in behind them and we'll start extracting those victims. Some of the lessons we learned from some of our incidents, specifically Pulse nightclub in Orlando, was that we were leaving victims on the table that could have been saved. So because of that, we developed this partnership with the NYPD. The cooperation's never been better. We've never gotten along better, and we're training constantly, and that's something new for an interagency training program to be as robust as it is. Dennis talked about it earlier about egos. This is one of those times where everybody check their egos and know that it's time to go to work. It's really the first joint operational task force to combat something like this that's existed. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Greg Brady. Greg Brady is captain of EMS operations for our Counter-Terrorism Rescue Task Force, and he'll give you a couple of points.
What a way to get thrown in the spotlight in front of everybody here today. Thank you, everybody. My responsibility to Chief Sheehan and Captain Mike Cook is that the medical care that's involved within an active shooter. As you can see, we did research of our unfortunate past incidents, and we saw that individuals are dying of wounds that are otherwise treatable. And we had to take a look at our system and see what we can do about getting into these environments and treating these victims and getting our hands on those. Because we were able to take a look and say that because of the past relationships of that, PD goes in, takes care of a threat, searches, makes sure it's all clear to bring in the medical personnel to start taking care of these victims. These victims were lying there, injured, hurt, and no care was given to them. So what we've done is we had to identify more or less what can we do for these victims, what type of medical care we can do. And with a team of us, we were able to take a look at our triage system, our treatments, and more or less what can we do that's best practice, and that's getting to the hospital, what Dr. Wasser had discussed before. So going through, and that's my responsibility, and that's where we teamed up all together to get into these victims and not letting them die of unnecessary wounds. Mike.
Mike? I just want to mention before Captain Mike Cook speaks, a very impressive gentleman, combat veteran for the United States, and we thank you for that service also, and now this service also, Mike.
Thank you, Dennis. Before I begin, can I just get everybody in the room just to stand up for 1 second, please? Just stand up. What I noticed around the room is a lot of sleepy eyes. So come on, stretch it out, get your hands up in the air, touch the guy next to you, right, Shaky? You're shaking already. All right. Thank you, everybody. Shake it out, right? You got to get that blood flowing. Right? No problem, Doc. You should know, Doc, right? Get that blood going, right? So, as Dennis just mentioned, my name is Captain Mike Cook. My portion of this new task force is I'm a tactician. I spent 10 years in the military, having been deployed 4 times already, to include Afghanistan. Like the chief just said, NYPD leads the way in, right? But now we got to come in behind them. How are we going to get into the zones? How are we going to get into these active threat environments? That's where I come in. I train with NYPD. We come up with the best practice possible. Let's get in here. Let's get our team to look at the overall picture. Have that team leader, just like Shaki said, right? Somebody's got to be in charge to take a step back, that tactical pause, and while everybody's still got that tunnel vision, who's actually looking at my back? The cops got the long guns, right? They can't do everything. They can't put their weapons down to take care of people. They can't turn around and say, oh, I got this, because that's one less security guard behind me. Now my team goes in. Greg's team is there. Everybody's doing patient care. We're worrying about secondary devices, right? Secondary attacks. You gotta have that overall big picture. To take a little bit of what everybody said, like Dr. Wassman, in Canada, they don't call it terrorist act. They call it organized violent action. Sure. We call it aggressive deadly. Something like that. Am I close?
We don't like to use the language, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Right. We call it aggressive deadly behavior. Why? Because it's more than just active shooter. It's bomb threats, car ramming, slashings, right? When you think of terrorism, are these the things that you guys think about normally, right? One thing that everybody's kind of neglecting as I stand here is fire as a weapon, right? Terrorists like to use fire now. So this is something that it's becoming more of a complex attack, right? You got fire going, you got somebody shooting, bomb just went off. We still got to get in there. We still got to get the people out. That's where the tactician part of it comes in. But now how do we get in there? How do we get these people who were possibly still alive out of this area, but we have a fire still going? But the cops can't go in because we have a fire still going. See what I'm getting at here? So that's my portion of it. So I don't want to take up any more time. I think Ari's about to give me like the hook, right?
I could never give you the hook. I know better.
Thank you.
And thank you, gentlemen, for your service. We're going to now open it up to questions, comments. Ari's going to we're going to have a couple of remote mics going around the room. I'll leave you with, that was a great that Mike thought of to stand up, because even your own bodies, it's been a long trip. A lot of us have jet lag here, and it wakes you back up again. So I'll tell you a story that the ambassador told at IDC in Manhattan a few months ago. It's a cute story. He says, I'm on a lot of panels like this. He says, and he's sitting here talking. He says, and I get up and I'm about to speak. He says, and the guy gets up. He said he walks right in front of me, right towards the door. I says, hey, where the hell are you going? He said, I'm going to get a haircut. He says, you're going to get a haircut? He says, yeah. He said, why don't you get a haircut before you came here? He said, well, before you started speaking, I didn't need a haircut. So I always, it's a serious subject, but I do a lot of public speaking. I always start and finish with something that's humorous, because believe it or not, it opens up, I'm sure Dr. Wash will tell you, it opens up the endorphins in the brain, and it lets you absorb more information in. So the ambassador's told some great jokes. I just told him at lunch yesterday, so I'm using yours tomorrow. I'm using yours Thursday. So it's in serious times, and we're a serious subject. We still have to live and laugh and look out for each other. So I am going to, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to make you ask a question. So we want to have some dialogue back and forth. This is why this room, not because of me or our panel, a great panel, but we've always seemed to be packed for this workshop or this symposium because of you folks. And we learn stuff from you. I'll give you one quick thing to tell you how much you can learn from people. 12 years ago, I did a live operation, a drill, on a gambling boat. Okay, they let us have the boat for the whole day. It was to be a cruise ship that was taken over by terrorists who were stabbing and shooting people on a cruise ship. My wife and I like to cruise. The truth is this: you go on a cruise ship, they have a steakhouse. Tell them you need a knife. They give you a knife this big to cut the steak. You can drop it right in your pocket. I did it in front of my brother-in-law to make a demonstration. My wife says, you're out of your mind. I said, I just want to show Marvin how easy it is to get weapons on a cruise ship. They've tightened up now. They have the same kind of cabin doors we have in an aircraft. So we have all these people. Of course, the joint operation, we're going to have the cruise ship taken over. We had the Coast Guard involved. And the next day we do a hot wash. After that, we discuss what was the best thing we did, what was the worst thing we did. A 19-year-old young man in the Coast Guard for less than 7 months came up with this. He says, well, what I saw, we had some of the the people on the cruise ship were jumping off the back of the ship. We had guys in dry suits who were make believe, people that were on the vessel, so they wouldn't get stabbed or shot. And then the Coast Guard picked them up. He says, and we sat them on the two seats in the what's called a rib, and then we drove them in to be debriefed by the FBI and all the counterterrorism and the police folks. Now the Coast Guard, after 9/11, they carry a 45 on their hip. So I knew this young man had a burning question. He said to me, "Am I allowed to ask a question?" I said, "Of course." Captain of the port sitting next to me, the big boss for the whole sector of the Coast Guard. This kid gave a wake-up call to everybody by his observation. He said, so we picked the two guys up out of the water, and we sat them down, on the seat, and then we went to the controls and we drove the boat in with our 45s right here. He said, how do we know they weren't terrorists? To pull those 45s out of our pocket, shoot us, and take off in the boat. You could hear a pin drop in the room. So you learn sometimes from people brand new in the game. He had just graduated the Coast Guard Academy 2 months before. He made that observation. We're sitting people. When we have a bank robbery, and we have a lot of them in the United States, when the police get there, if the robbers are not long gone, everybody in the bank gets handcuffed. The customers, the manager, the secretaries, everybody gets handcuffed until we can identify. Well, I'm the bank manager. That's fine. As soon as we find out you're the bank manager, we'll take the handcuffs off. Because many times we have people going in doing bank robberies in suits and ties to blend in with the public. And then they go out and they drive away and say, well, I can't be a bank robber. Look how well he's dressed. But people are very smart to do that. So this young man, like I say, I always beg for questions and comments because you learn something every day. So who's first up? And you can ask a question of the fire service, the EMS, or our counterparts here from NYPD.
Hear me. I'm from San Francisco. I do work in San Quentin. It's one of the older prisons. And my question is to the gentleman from Australia. California is a gang-ridden culture. So we do a lot of rehabilitative programs, and we're effective, I believe, in terms of recidivism. And I'm wondering, when you're speaking about incarcerating terrorists, if you likewise have rehabilitative programs and if what their efficacy might be?
The answer is we, you can probably hear me without it as well. We do have rehabilitative programs. Essentially the work we do within the prison environment utilises the Board of Imams, which we have in the state of Victoria. So the Imams represent a group of moderate to, there we go. They represent a group of moderate to quite fundamentalist Muslims in Melbourne. Specifically, often, as you would imagine, a lot of those that we charge with terrorism offences are Salafists. So we work with the Board of Imams to actually, I guess in part, try to reframe the ideology in a sense that it's their understanding, and often it's a very naive understanding of their religion. They're quite effective in that, but can I just say in relation to the rehabilitative aspects, we rely on the participation of those individuals. So if they, our evidence would suggest that if they don't want to participate in those programs, that they won't get anything out of it. And we acknowledge that some that are on the extreme spectrum, we're just not going to move. We work closely with the parole board because of that, and we will provide advice supported by not only the evidence of the imams, but my forensic psychologists and other health professionals in terms of next steps when they're coming out for early release. We have a disbursement methodology in our prisons, so we deliberately don't hold them in the same prison, so we spread them across the state of Victoria quite deliberately. There is a risk inherent in that because there's the opportunity for them to radicalise others in that space. But from what we've seen so far, it works well. We've had some early successes, and in part a lot of that's about engaging in employment post their release. But look, we're really yet to see with our longer sentence prisoners, and I'll give one example that's not going to be impacting my lifetime, but
We had a woman, a Bangladeshi woman called Mamina Shoma, who arrived in Australia last year with the endeavour of killing an Australian citizen on behalf of ISIS. That was exactly why she came. She was from a well-educated family in Bangladesh. Her father was an insurance manager there. She stabbed a person at whose house she was staying. We charged her with committing an act of terrorism under the Commonwealth Criminal Code. She received a sentence of 42 years. Her earliest release date is 2049. So that provides a very big challenge for our prison environment because she is regarded in that environment as very high risk. She's indicated if she's brought in a mainstream population, she will kill and then probably kill herself. So I think our endeavours are really good, but it's not going to work for all. I guess that would be my answer to your question. Important to do it as part of prevention, but it won't work for all.
My name is Rudy. I'm also from Northern California, north of San Francisco. Shai, I wanted to ask you about your theater of operations. So you talk about Israel. Are you talking about Israel proper, or are you talking about Judea and Samaria also? Do you operate in that? And are the theaters different for the bomb squad? Do you find that the nature of the attack or the nature varies from the different theaters?
The Israel National Bomb Squad worked until 5 years ago all over the places. In Gaza Strip, in Judea and Samaria is our bomb techs. Just 5 years ago, part of the places transfer to the army. For example, Gaza Strip, because we are not anymore there, the IDF took the responsibility on the line of the border. But from the line inside to the state of Israel is our bomb techs. We have almost 450 bomb techs sprayed all over the country. In Judea and Samaria also. Most of the squads there are under the Green Beret or the Mishmar HaGvul, but they are police officers.
Hello, everybody. I'm Christian from Berlin, Germany, and I have a question to our Italian friend. You told us how successful or how lucky you are in Italy, and I knock on wood, you will stay in this position. I know that you have in Italy a very special position of the financial police.
Yes.
Financial police is the right word for it.
Oh, okay.
And they can do many, many things we wish we have in Germany also, but we don't have. Can you tell me something, or can you tell us something about the special role and the special possibilities of your financial guard or financial police?
Okay.
Please.
Thanks for your question. Actually, I belong to a different law enforcement agency. Then to explain to you, we are three main law enforcement agencies. Us, the Carabinieri Corps, the National Police, and the Financial Police. And regarding your question, they operate within the Ministry of the Economy. So they depend on the Ministry of the Economy. So they have like a flow of information which is a bit separated from us. The Financial Intelligence Unit, which is within the Ministry of the Financing, is able to interact with them, with the Financial Police. But in that committee, I was talking about during my presentation, that is the Counter-Terrorism Strategic Analysis Committee, means that strategic means financing, for sure, and FTF, all the other threats. So there is the place where we share that information. So they develop analysis on the financial tracking, but they share not only the results, the outcomes of that analysis, but also just the fact that we tracked a transaction which is suspect. And then we develop our own analysis based on, I don't know, the name of the people who were the actors of the transaction, or phone's number, or anything else. And they develop their own analysis based on economics. Then we bring the pieces together and we go on with the investigation. That's how it works mainly.
This was the idea behind my question, because finance is all in terrorism.
Yeah. You know what? In our experience, it is like this. We detect by any means, mainly with intel, FBI, our intelligence services. Then we corroborate all the elements or the data that we collected on that individuals with the financial aspects. It is very difficult to find an operation, an investigation starting from the financial aspect and then move to the operational aspect. That's our experience, but it is important to stress that we do not want to say, okay, financing is not important. No, at all. But that's our experience. You're welcome.
We heard a lot of past couple minutes about interaction and coordination between various law enforcement agencies, and we heard also very positively about the corroboration right now between the FBI and the NYPD and other organizations in that field. Is there any room for increased cooperation between police and law enforcement agencies and agencies in other fields, whether that's finance or state, I don't know, anything else, where maybe a little bit of information that is not coming to you can come in, not just for catching the next guy, but also finding out what the next kinds of attacks will be. We're seeing more fire lately, we're seeing more rammings and stabbings and all that, and we know that terrorists like to change their tactics. And is there more room for that? Who needs to be worked with, and how much more can we do with that?
In the United States, we've brought in a private partnership. 91% of the critical infrastructure in the United States of America is protected and guarded by private security. Some armed, some not armed. 91%. Almost everything is private security. We have government buildings, I won't tell you where, with high-level things going on that have private contractor security forces protecting them. So we've brought them in right from the get-go. They have to make them a part. Also, our power plants, our gas services, our waterfronts where they're transferring fuel or natural gas, all private security. So we have brought them in. It's a community deal. You have to bring everybody in. You have to bring students in. You have to bring teachers in. You have to have, everybody has to buy in if we have any chance of controlling and one day hopefully eliminating what we know as terrorism, where we have a conference like this and there wouldn't be much to talk about. I don't think it's coming in my lifetime. Hopefully God above hears it. But why do they do this? Because they hate. And there's nothing worse than when people hate that want to get even with other people and injure them and kill them and make a statement. Hate is just, I don't have to tell the Israeli people, you want to talk about what happened with the Holocaust and whatever, talk to an Israeli. And this country has incredible resolve. I am amazed every day. They are a model in the world on how they do it. And I have a saying, it's every Israeli, all day, every day. I'm asked a lot on TV about, ramping up. Something happens, we're ramping up here, we're ramping up there. I think I shocked them about a month ago when there was an attack, and they said, what do they do in Israel when something like this happens? I said, they never ramp up. The reporter was shocked. She said, you know what you just said? You said the Israelis never ramp up. She said, why? I said, because they never ramp down. They are ramped up all day, every day. And they has to be that way. Shaik, you'll be the first to tell you as a brigadier general.
Just before can I just respond to that question as well? Sorry to interrupt your question. But can I just say, in terms of a CT operation, we would always, we stand up our joint arrangements. I think they work well. They include our intelligence security services, emergency responders, the Australian Defence Force, AUSTRAC, who's our financial regulation authority. We bring everyone in. Border Force are included, so like the equivalent of Homeland Security. We work closely. We exercise well in that space. So, in fact, we've just had some changes to legislation allowing me as a state representative to request military support much more readily, and we're about to exercise that on a piece of power plant, which is a piece of critical infrastructure. So I think in that space, we have to and do actually work really well. The test is we've got to keep exercising. It's practice, practice, practice. You can't just assume that everyone integrates at the same level. So I think the comment's quite valuable, so thanks.
Next question. Right here, we'll work it right up to the back. Good.
Hello, my name is Josh. I'm a post-grad here in the master's program for Counter-Terrorism Homeland Security.
Where are you from?
New York.
Just let us all know where you're from, if you don't mind.
My question goes out to Major Sasha and also Mr. Monette. If you guys can please discuss whatever you can on the new capabilities or tactics that either the Park Police Department or the NASA or the Metropolitan Police on the new capabilities or tactics that the department will take in preventing different types of like terrorism scenarios. For example, at like Jones Beach, where there's kind of just one way in and one way out, and also on like the biggest challenge that the department has in like assessing the risk or threat there.
Excuse me, Josh. It's a great question, and no different than any other police department within the United States. We constantly train and we assess on possible threats and scenarios. And to go back to the gentleman's question with private partnership, we also bring them in also. So we are constantly training and assessing and bringing in new partners, whether it be a governmental partner or a private partner. So we can't touch on too much of what we're doing tactically down to the nitty gritty, but have we added certain programs that other departments, such as Israel, has been using for years? Absolutely we have. We've learned from them, and we brought those best practices over to us and over to the United States. We've taken a look at it. We realized, you saw the New York City Fire Department and the NYPD working together, right? Let's go get the victims, because originally our training taught us an active shooter was what? Neutralize the threat at all costs, neutralize the threat first. So what we were doing, we were stepping over victims. And like my brothers in the fire department here said, we were letting people perish that maybe could have been saved. So what we have done is we've adjusted from that. So we've taken a look at it. We've brought EMS, we brought in what we call combat EMTs to come in with the police and respond to these hot situations. So that's one of the tactical things that we have changed, and some of the partnerships that we have brought in. Here's a major thing with a private partnership. I have a concert venue that I'm responsible for, rather large, and they have security guards. So at any given night, there might be 300-400 security guards working. I may not have that many cops working, obviously. So what we did was we've taken those private security guards, who are not law enforcement, and we have put them through school to teach them how to apply a tourniquet, right? So this has never been done before. This is all new to us, especially for law enforcement. But we reached out even further and went out to a private entity and said, hey, you know what, there's 400 of you guys. We could use the help. And if we do have, God forbid, a mass casualty incident, they can come in, help, and start saving lives. They can stop bleeding immediately. So those are some of the tactics that we've come up. Now, when it comes to lethal force tactics, yes. Have we upped our game? Yes, we have. We've come in with bigger artillery. Over here, it amazed me the other night. I'm sorry I have to bring this up, but we were out drinking, so shocking and surprising. But we were on the beach, and we were sitting here having a good time with my brothers from the NYPD and the fire department. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's right. They were having tea. So, a couple came down. They were wearing shorts and summer shirt. And on the back, they had M4s slung on the back of them. Okay, that was astounding to me. I got to be honest, because we don't see that in the United States. I'm sorry, M4s or M16s. They weren't in uniform. So to me, how do you identify in the United States? That would be a big concern, wouldn't it? So here, not so much. And even in uniform, and I got to tell you, talk about tactics. I don't mean to steal the show here, but it took a long time, and it was a fight, and it was a battle to get people to accept a simple long gun, right? We all know that the United States is a gun culture, okay? But people don't like to see them, okay? Especially in certain parts of the country. So in my part of the country, and I just told you I work in a recreational environment, people come with their families to enjoy themselves for the day, whether it be the ocean, whether it be a trail. They don't want to see, first of all, for the most part, the police. Second of all, they don't want to see heavy artillery, right? It frightens them. But as time has gone by, and we have kind of integrated it slowly into that culture to let them know, hey, we're here, we've upped our game, okay? That's why we have these long guns, to protect you. So, yeah, so tactically, yes, those are some of the things that we've done. Has it been easy? No, sometimes not so much. Sometimes it's a struggle. only because of some cultural differences and bringing people on board and why and what we're doing. So, yeah, we made significant strides tactically, not just on my part, the NYPD, local, national, the counties, the villages. We've all changed our game completely. And a lot of it has to do from what we've learned here and past experience that we've experienced in the United States. So,
Last year on this panel, we had a gentleman, and I won't mention his name, and we have all differences of opinions, and he stated to everybody and challenged the fact in the United States that we're using military-style vehicles, assault-style vehicles. We call them the Bearcat. We have all different names for them, mostly to get in to stop the threat and rescue people. You know, we're supposed to protect lives first. And he says, I think it's ridiculous that in the United States that President Trump has gotten us a lot of military vehicles that the Army uses. It's a war that we're in. And I said to him, I said, if your family was trapped inside with somebody blowing the place up and shooting people randomly, you can't go in through a brick wall or a concrete wall with a police car or an SUV. We need the Bearcat that's got a ram arm on it to get in there. I don't think I convinced him to change his mind. Everything is about how does it affect me personally, but he was completely dead set against us using it. We're going to continue to use them in the United States to rescue people as quickly as you can and to protect the officers also. As the Major said, people don't like to see long guns. More and more, you know when people were great right after 9/11, as we went through TSA, okay, we were all, okay, sure, search me, oh, take my shoes off, take my belt off. We were all fine with that. But as time goes by, I don't have to tell anybody in this room, it's more of an annoyance now. Sometimes some of the TSA people may be not so polite, and this is ridiculous, I gotta take my shoes off, and you know, now it's a little, then what happens, God forbid again, we have another major attack, then we're right back to, oh, fine, I'll take my shoes off, what else do I have to do? Because I want to get on that plane and land safely in Israel, and I want to get on that plane to land safely at JFK in a couple of days to see my kids and my wife. So it all depends on tolerance level. I was telling my students it goes up and down depending on what's going on. If nothing's going on for a long time, oh, here we go with this. Oh, open your pocketbook. You're going into, you have them do that, right, Tony, for the concert? When you go in to see a big concert at Jones Beach, some of the best rock groups and other groups, country groups in the country, you have to open your bag. Some people get highly annoyed at it. They get highly annoyed at it until something has happened not too many weeks before that. They're more than willing. But if nothing's happened for a long time, our tolerance level, they don't have any tolerance. This is an annoyance. Empty your pockets. What do you got here? Did you sneak a beer in? Do you have a bottle of booze in there? Do you have a weapon? Do you have a knife? And sometimes people might have one of these Gerber tool things that they wear on their belt. A friend of mine wears it all the time. You open it up, it has a screwdriver, it has a pliers, it has this and that, but it also has a knife on it. He said, I got stopped. The guy said, you can't come in here with this. He said, it's a Gerber tool. You know, it's to fix stuff around the house, around the car, around the boat. He said, yeah, but it has a knife blade on it, so it's not acceptable. So the tolerance level goes up by how soon and how recent people lose their lives. If people lose their lives 25,000 miles away, it's not so bad. When people start to lose their lives in the United States, and if it's in Colorado, God forbid, it's not too bad. Something happens in Pennsylvania, you say, well, that's right alongside us. Something happens at Montauk Point down these. Well, as soon as it starts to get closer to us, our whole mentality changes, and we're more than welcome for all the security that we have to go through. And it's not going to change. But TSA, I've seen the level of annoyance. Right now, it's pretty high in the U.S. People get teed off that they have to go through this thing and take their shoes off, and sometimes some of the TSA people, I have a presentation I'm doing for Congressman King, 2 congressional plaques, right? She made me take them out of the envelope, and she said, we have to read these before you can go through with it. I said, you can read them. It's for two Israelis who have done a terrific job in terrorism, so the congressman's going to, you saw it before, we're going to honor them. I have to read these before. She emptied everything out and do what you got to do. And I was like walking down the jetway to get on the plane. I'm saying, I don't know whether they're going to, it says that thank you for your work in counter-terrorism. And I thought it was a little over the top, but that's what it is. That's what it is. I mean, I was annoyed for a few minutes at that when I told our team, they said, what do you mean she had to read it? She said, I want to read it. And we had a plaque to give somebody else, Dr. Benoit. I have to read what's on the plaque. Take that out of the box, take the paper off it. Okay, read it. But that's a plaque. So sometimes they go over the top, and you just have to bear with it. And again, tolerance level, as you all know, and wherever you're flying back to your home countries, depends. Anybody in here from I know a lot of people here from not from the United States that think that their own country's airline check-in or security is enough or not enough. Anybody? Pretty strong, right? From other parts of the country, yes. That's how it is globally now. I don't think there's any airports at all. We still have, believe it or not, globally about 30 to 40 hijackings a day in small aircraft. Believe it or not, it goes on. Nobody even talks about it. Throughout the world, there's about 20 or 30 hijackings every day. Next question.
Hello, my name is Veronica. I'm from the Czech Republic, and my question goes probably to Mr. Wasser or Mr. Astasio. You told us about encouraging the public to report suspicious behavior, suspicious packages, whatever. But I think it must be also, on one hand, it's good for police to receive the information, but on the other, it must be quite overwhelming and challenging for the police capacity. And my question is, how have you managed to deal with that, not to get overwhelmed by the number of information you receive? Thank you.
You know, as soon as you brought up that question, the first thing that jumped into my mind was overwhelming. That's exactly what jumped into my brain. Yeah, it can be. It can be overwhelming, and it's resource draining. Sorry, sorry. It's very resource draining. You know, we only have so many officers working in a day, and you know, people are quick. And I thank them, and I thank God that people do report these suspicious packages, and we do check them out. And the truth of the matter is, we do it. We have no choice. So we will drain our resources, and it does become overwhelming, and it pulls away from other areas. We have people calling for the police for service, and we have to go and check this out first. Excuse me, because it's a priority. So there's really no short answer. There's no quick answer here. Is basically, yes, it's overwhelming. We want people to continue to do that because they are the eyes and ears for the police and for their own safety. And there is no really great answer for this other than overwhelming. Yes, we go. No matter what, we deal with it. We take care of it. We have no choice. Okay.
So two things. One, I want to clarify. I'm not a political appointee. I work for the government. I work for the RCMP. So earlier I made reference to we don't like to use the word terrorist. That's our politicians don't like to use that word. But in the area of law enforcement, we use it quite openly and honestly because it is what it is. We call it what it is. Probably a lot of law enforcement people in the room. So I just wanted to qualify that. Regarding the number of, I think it was made reference to, obviously by the Major and earlier by Dennis, that we welcome those calls. We have no choice. We have to address them. I think from a Canadian standpoint, we live in a bit of a bubble and we're a little bit oblivious. And I think you were to ask 9 out of 10 Canadians, they would say, no, everybody loves us. Nobody wants to hurt us. And the isolated incidents are isolated, and they are, thankfully. Reference earlier to knocking wood in Italy. But they exist, and we have packages left everywhere, and the police respond. And yes, they're called away from other calls and other issues, but they have to respond, and they welcome the opportunity. And there have been incidents where things have been found, suspicious packages with potentially explosive or fake explosives. And that's what terrorism is to terrorize people and to scare people in evacuation. So we have no choice, and it's our reality.
If you ask yourself, from where is all the advertising of see something, say something, you start here in Israel. And I'm talking about in the 80s, the early 80s. We understood that we must teach the children to be careful. Why? What is the reason? We found all kind of booby trap devices that sprayed in Israel. For example, booby trap doll, that a kid tried to pick it up and it exploded. So we start education. with the class, with the kindergartens, and teach the young children look for the danger, what to do, to take something, to leave it, to call the older, and then we go up to the schools, the primary schools, the high schools, and then we gave a lot of video clips in the television to explain to the people what to do and look for. And we ask them to call us. If you leave a package or bag in Tel Aviv, in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, someone will call the police.
My question is for everybody, but more for Sabrina, I guess. You mentioned that one of the best practices is kind of unifying and working together, and the one way you do that is through a unified database, which has its own pros and cons, but I think we can all agree is a great method. But you also mentioned the 2020 Police 2020 plan or process, and I was wondering, like, in terms of sharing best practices, does Germany, or for that matter, does the European Union, integrate kind of other processes, from a legal standpoint or from an actual practical standpoint, in order to put its policing procedure to the top tier? Because you guys you learn from your own experience, such as like the Christmas market and whatnot. I'm sure you've put into preventative processes so that doesn't happen in the future. But we can learn from anything from 9/11 in New York to events in Italy and even in Canada, with the large amount of killing and injured. So what's the process that Germany and the European Union takes to integrate that practically and legally?
Yes, the idea was. Okay, you hear me. The idea was that if it doesn't work in Germany, if we have such challenges with databases and connecting service authority, how will it work in Europe or in the international context? So you have to start and to look at your own country and your own databases. On the other side, you're right, we have a European framework, of course, and the European countries, they have to implement the rules. But there are also a lot of jurisdiction about it. The European court skipped some laws about data, Vorratsdatenspeicher, I don't know, where you collect data before the people are suspect and these things, and they said, oh no, you don't have the competences for it, so it was a European decision. Germany, yes, they tried to implement these rules, but here our constitutional court was very vague and said, oh, perhaps it's too much. So it's some European countries, they do it. You have the European frame, and it's only a frame, and you have to be inside this frame. But I think when I compare to France, for example, they have these rules. But in Germany, it's always a little bit late. And you talk about the experience of 9/11 and these things, and sometimes I get the impression that the people, the citizens, are more afraid of being observed by the state than being a victim of a terroristic act. So yes, and that's what Dennis said. After the attack, after the Breitscheidplatz attack, everybody's wanted video surveillance. We don't have video surveillance in public places in Berlin. It's not allowed. So after the attack, they said, oh, we need a law for video surveillance on public places. But now it's 3 years, and they don't. It's not. We have no official video surveillance, and we have no law. The law didn't pass. So we have to look to the other countries. We have to look to Europe, but the European framework is not the solution.
Hi, I'm from Canada. Actually, the question I have is it's about a conversation I had yesterday with military officers and police officers. We came to we were talking about resilience after an event. And what we all agreed on is that at some point, there's chaplains that show up, rabbis, priests, and imams. Now, obviously, we were talking about the imams, and we all agreed that they all come from different schools of thought and ideologies. And our question was, we know, like I can say for sure, I'm aware that our Christian priests are being vetted before they come to talk to us after a difficult event. I don't know about rabbis, and our question had to do with the imams. Because they do not go to a ministry in particular, who actually vet them to come to talk to us after a difficult event? How do we know that those imams in particular are not from a school of thought that could be into the extreme ways? So I don't know who could answer that. I'm a bit aware of how Canada does it, but I'm not sure, like my other military people.
Well, that's a very intriguing question. The thing is, I have neighbors that live 40 years around the corner from me that are Muslim family. Great family, terrific kids. My kids grew up with their kids. I recently sat next to him at a wedding of another neighbor, and he said, I know you work in this terrorism, whatever. He said, the thing that annoys all of us here that are Muslim in the United States that love this country is that the terrorists hijacked our culture and everything we do. They're peaceful family. He has a great business. He works hard. His wife works. He's been a great neighbor in the community for over 40 years. So as far as vetting, what we know is that we don't know. You can only vet people so much. We've had people. We've had the guy that blew up what was his name, McVeigh. He was a decorated military officer. When he killed all those people a few years ago, people saying, how the hell did that happen? So we don't know. There's some people on a turn of a dime, you read something in the paper, you say, how could that guy have done that? He had such a great life and a great career. How does a woman drive her car with 2 kids in it into a lake so that all 3 of them drowned? We don't know. That's the one thing that I don't think we can ever get it down. Now, on our prisons and our jails, we know that there's radicalization, and they have a great crop of people ready to do something. They're in jail, so they're not happy with the government anyway. And we have had imams, but we've also had radical priests and radical rabbis. So it doesn't just go to the Muslim population. It's across the board. You try to vet people. I always say there's bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad cops, there's bad politicians, 1 or 2. When you go across the board, there's no profession that doesn't have some people in it that are not bad and don't do the right thing. They do bad things. So you just have to be looking for any signals. I'll let Dr. Wasser pick up on it. Any signals that let you know that something seems a little out of line here. Doctor?
So,
When you're just come out of an event that caused you some form of trauma, I don't care what you say, we all have trauma after we deal with a difficult event. We become highly susceptible, extremely vulnerable to whatever the person, especially a person in authority, would tell us. And that's why I'm wondering, how do you know? Because we're in that vulnerable...
The best that we can possibly do under the circumstances. And I always tell young cops that usually whatever you do as a police officer, military officer, if you're acting in good faith, you usually don't get in trouble. But it's a dilemma. As Dr. Ganot would tell you, that is one of the biggest dilemmas is the person next to you, the next person is going to look to do something because somehow they had a vision that they feel disenfranchised or something happened in their lives that says, you know what, I'm gonna cause some mayhem here. Are they sitting home watching the TV and say, you know what, I've been disenfranchised my whole life. When it was time to play basketball, they say, you stink, you can't play. If he was the person in school where some of the other guys knocked the books out of his hands, right, or spilt over his milk into his lunch, is that the person that, as Mordecai Jasansky says, Detective Morty as we call him, says, is that the next rock star in the making? And sometimes it is, unfortunately. Doctor?
Nicole, merci pour votre collaboration. Thank you for your collaboration, colleague. We don't know. I'm not sure if any vetting goes on whatsoever. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, the imam who was gave the eulogy at the horrific mosque shooting in Quebec City 2 years ago, he was the lead. He was advised by the Prime Minister that he's not allowed to run in the election, which was announced yesterday, because he was going to run for Parliament and has been found to be outspokenly xenophobic, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. So here you have a lead imam known to be a pillar of society, and I worry about the people that he attended to and provide support to after the mosque shooting in Quebec City, now saying the guy who was there to give me support is a guy who's an outspoken racist, and bad enough that the Prime Minister of Canada pointed him out and kicked him out of the ability to run in our democratic election. So I don't know that we vet anybody, rabbi or priest or minister or imam for that matter.
Just speak from Victoria Police's point of view. So we do vet. We have a very large police chaplaincy, which is multi-faith. We do vet all those individuals that come into that space. So that absolutely occurs. When we've had events, and we have very good awareness of those who are on the extreme end, the Salafist end, that believe that violence is an acceptable means to an end. We know who those individuals are. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop them ministering, because sometimes that's very difficult. But I think that's why we talked earlier on about the importance of our joint arrangements. That's why we have those arrangements there. So our security agency, the ASIO, ourselves, and the Australian Federal Police, post an event like that, I'm very confident we'll know how those individuals play out. That's the immediacy of the event. But post, it's the weeks and months ahead, that's a much bigger challenge. So I would say that's our biggest risk.
It's just a few additional comments to the previous discussion. I should say I'm Mike Wine. I'm a director of the Community Security Trust. I'm also the UK member of a standing commission of the Council of Europe. And the Council of Europe is the oldest of the European institutions and is responsible for standards within Europe. And my role is to inspect member states' compliance with the conventions, most notably the Human Rights Convention, but also the Terrorism Convention. So to the question that was asked of... stand up? My comment really, it goes to the question that was asked of Sabrina, which is, what are the European laws on this? And according to European law, criminal justice is the responsibility of member states. It's not a European-wide responsibility. Europe sets the conventions, it sets certain standards, it issues directives which have the force of law. There's 2008 directive on combating hate, 2012 directive on putting victims at the heart of the criminal justice process. But combating crime and criminal justice is the responsibility of member states. Now, I don't inspect Germany. It's not one of my states. There are other states I do inspect. And my particular focus in this Council of Europe work is I investigate the police. I investigate police and security services to ensure that they have transposed European standards into domestic legislation and are applying those standards according to their own laws, but the wider European framework. So there is an inspection process, but we have to recognize that countering crime is to the responsibility of member states. Terrorism is a moving target because there are now European agreements on countering terrorism, but they don't have the force of law in the way that other things do. So it's just sort of by way of explanation for those who are not Europeans.
Hi, yeah, I'm Arva. I work for SCN, which is basically the U.S. equivalent of CST. We secure Jewish communities, and is this better? Okay. So we've spoken of cooperation between agencies, and you spoke of community engagement, and I was wondering if you could talk, maybe FDNI as well, about work that your agencies does with the communities to help them protect themselves, whether it's training or having dedicated liaisons, whatever it may be.
So currently in the U.S., first, Tony, let me first start off by saying what happens in Israel stays in Israel. So we'll start off with that. Second thing is that the United States right now is starting a Stop the Bleed campaign where we're teaching civilians how to more or less treat any kind of massive hemorrhage or arterial hemorrhage, understanding that the first responders is the community. And it takes time for your first responders to get to an event. So we found it very important to make sure that while we're arriving to these events, that people actually start taking the initiative to helping an individual that has a massive bleed and how to use a tourniquet and having these pre-packaged tourniquets around so they have available, more or less like the AED, and understanding that CPR and teaching the community CPR. So we are doing that, working with our community and making sure that they have necessary things to combat these.
I want to add something. As I mentioned before, we teach the children and the oldest, but we are working with the communities all the time, explain them what is the dangers, what to do if, drills, exercise. All the time we are with them. Another thing is most of our oldest come from the army, so they know what to look and what to do if something happened, especially if you have rockets or something like this.
Can I just say, from a Victorian point of view, we have multi-faith panels. We work closely with the Jewish community in Melbourne through the community support group, the security group that look after the shuls, etc., and other crowded places. We have what's called a crowded places network. So we filter information out to our communities through that. And we have an executive crowded places network which really concentrates on those bigger places like very large shopping complexes and the like. And we filter information out through that. With the CSG, we provide training. We have liaison officers through all our communities of interest in Melbourne. So I think that space we do really well.
Daniele Moro, Italy. The question is, in Milano, we have the second biggest Jewish community in the country, 10,000 persons. Since a few years ago, the security inside the community asked the members to inform about social event that the families and the friends were planning. I had, say, in 2 weeks, a bar mitzvah at the Hotel Méridien. The security of the Jewish community in this way, on a voluntary form, knows whatever will happen in the next few days. They are in 24 hours contact with the authorities of Italy. So they know perfectly no uniform policeman will be there, but the authorities will know. The question is, does any other country have a program or of this kind and has any experience? Because in my opinion, in Milan is working very, very well, and people are very happy about this because they connect with the Jewish community and they know perfectly the person because they are taking care of the kids in the Jewish school, in the all the institutions, so they know each other. They know that they are working for the community.
And yeah, every Jewish community has a security.
That's something that I didn't know.
They're not all as advanced as ours because we have research capacity as well. But we all provide volunteers, trained volunteers for security of Jewish events and Jewish institutions.
I'm going to let the Colonel comment on it also.
Yes, I'm involved in this discussion because, but I won't take advantage of this question, which is, I mean, the answer is already done. We do cooperate with such services. We don't need hammers or people in uniform, just, being there very, not so heavy, but being there. And that goes back to your question, actually, because us as Carabinieri Corps, we are we have a special feature, which is being present even in the smallest village on the top of the hill. And this is important in terms of the intelligence cycles, your question, meaning how do you manage the overwhelming flow of information? So just think about being in Sicily. Down in Sicily, we have mountains also in Sicily, even if it's famous only for the sea, but we have mountains. I've been there for a while. And just think about a Tunisian guy who is trying to become a star, who is gonna listen to his neighbor saying, I have some suspicions on this guy. It will be the head of the Carabinieri station, because there you have him, the Carabinieri station commander, you have the mayor, you have the church, and then you have the doctor, and that's it. All these four figures, and that's it. 150 inhabitants. So from that very point starts the intelligence cycle. Whatever it is in Milan for the Jewish community or that single individual on the top of the hill, the Carabinieri station is able to make the first assessment. So it is that a valuable information or not. Then they pass through the chain of command up to me in Rome so that I'm able to liaise with the other officers, intelligence community, the international community, and we evaluate each of these information, but that information has passed through all those levels. And when it arrives to me, it seems like probably it is a good information that we need to exploit. Okay?
What is the time frame for that information to go?
It depends on the information. So each level, if there's a red flag in the second level, for example, it is like, a missile to me, and in my table I have that information. I share it immediately with my counterparts, and we evaluate the threat. But this up to all the levels. So each one has its own responsibility, and this is the mechanism. Okay?
We'll take maybe one or two more questions. We realize that the only thing between lunch and you is us.
My name is Gil Kleiman. I'm from Israel, but originally from Brooklyn. There's a question I want to ask you and people from Germany. The immigrants that are coming in, who's covering them? In other words, you're dealing with cultures that the Italians, the average Italian doesn't know, or the Germans definitely don't know. I've been to Germany, I've been to Italy. Who's covering these people? Is it a Carabinieri thing? Who's dealing with that?
I'll leave to her.
Okay. Yeah, good question. When we opened...
No one wanted to talk about it, so I figured I'd mention it.
Yeah. When Germany decided, or the Chancellor decided in 2015 to open the border, I think it was an idea of humanity to let people in. But the problem, or the challenge, but it's a problem, was that the people weren't controlled. They were in and nobody knows who's coming and so on. And after that, they had the problem to turn these back. So they implemented authorities to care about it. They come and they have to be identified in order to get money, of course. But the problem is because they're not controlled when they come, so they have a lot of identities and yes, and that's the problem, and I think that's the problem until now. You don't know it. It's that way. Yeah. So you can only control it about money now. But yesterday I heard Italian has a completely different way.
Yes.
So we'll take one last question.
My name is Dagmar Frank. I'm coming from Germany, and I come from one of the cities with the highest migration rate in Germany. And I tell you what we do. There's a lot of woman power, and all these women in the city taking care of these children, of these people who are coming. And so far, it's working very well. But my question, we are living peaceful together. But my question, is there anything I could tell the woman what we should be aware of it and what we could do.
Yes. To go back to your yes, because we, we are the forefront. We are there, and please.
Sometimes women from Muslim backgrounds saying to us, we are so politically correct, we don't take care of their women's rights.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned headscarf for children.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just have the Colonel
Yeah.
answer that and answer your question, and then...
Yeah, to make it operational, and going back to Ari's question, actually, the European legal framework. The professor was right. We have rules that regulate directly within the state, but each state then has the autonomy to regulate within its border. And so in terms of databases and sharing information, the European Union so far is not able to interfere with our business. First. Second, Europe is helping us. How? Let's put aside all the political implications. But we have the Schengen information system, which allows us, each time one individual tries to enter our borders, we pick up all the biometrics data, the fingerprints, and then even if he's trying to come back because he was deported last year for any reason, criminal or terrorist, and if he's trying to come back, I will detect him. But, lastly, Europe level, state level magistrates, for us, we need to convince them that we are following a bad guy. And this has a huge implication. That's why we resort to preventative wiretappings and deportations, because there we need just to convince some, not the magistrates, for wiretapping, yes, but just the accusation, not the judge. But it is important to underline that my job is not only to collect information, to start the intelligence process, to share information, to look at our databases, but also to convince magistrate that we need to follow that guy and arrest him. So there's another level that I need to take into account.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank everybody that spoke. We especially want to thank all of you in the audience and Ari for coordinating this. When you get back to your own countries, I want you to, the first person you see who is a first responder, fire, police, military, thank them for their service. If you think we had a very good workshop, tell all your friends, tell all your neighbors. If you think it's not so good, keep it to yourself.